Just look for the link as always. Okay, got it. Let me just share it in a group. All right, I think we can start. Martin, do you know go first?
Sure. So I'm preparing the issues for BLS, but yeah, I realize probably I want to solve like at least the first, so I can get all the boilerplate going with the NIF and all that. So after we have like all that stuff, like implementing all the rest of the functions should be pretty straightforward. So I took a quick shot. First, I implemented the spec tests related to BLS. Well, not the spec tests per se, but like the kind of like the boilerplate for to have that running. And now I'm seeing if I can quickly implement the sign function with an if, just interfacing with the one that Lighthouse uses. And yeah, once I have that, the idea is to create issues for external contributors. So yeah, that's my plan. It's looking good so far. I hope I will have it today.
Awesome. Just to be sure, so you're working on the NIF boilerplate for the BLS part so that other contributors can start working on BLS as well. Did I understand correctly?
Yes, and I'm implementing the sign function, so other contributors have like at least one function to base their work on.
Okay, perfect. Got it. That's great. Paul, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I've been mainly focusing on implementing the SSD serialization and deserialization of the execution payload types. It's pretty complex because it's the biggest, or at least one of the biggest types that we need to implement. And there's some corner cases on some of the types, like some bit lists, uh, like some byte lists, and some U256. And the problem with that is that Rustler only supports up to U64. Um, so yeah, it's quite some corner cases, and we have problems with that. And also, what we found with Martin is that we could potentially have made errors while reading the YAML file from the actual specs, because basically what we're comparing, uh, the spec says that the base fee per gas should be in the specs U256, so it should be an unsigned integer. But in the in the specs that we have and that we compare against, it's a string, which is potentially problematic, and which could potentially mean that we do something wrong while reading the YAML file or something like that. So I'm trying to find a solution.
I'm not sure I get the problem. I definitely see that there's a problem. I'm not sure I understand it correctly. So
In the spec tests, like the result that we are comparing against, it is on a YAML file. So we just parse the YAML and we get the expected result. And what we see is a field has a string with some numbers, but it's a string instead of being an integer, which is what the spec says. So I'm not sure if
okay,
if we are parsing the YAML in a wrong way. But yeah, we should look at the YAML more carefully and see what's inside.
yeah, definitely. That sounds more like a parsing error than anything. I think that we should definitely convert it, especially considering that the Elixir doesn't have any problem with arbitrary size integers. So, like for instance, you can have an integer with 100 zeros without any kind of issues. Like that comes as a default in the language. I do see that being a problem with Rustler for bigger types, like Paul said, yeah, the U256 is probably a problem in Rustler that we need to take a decision on if we haven't already. But in the Elixir side, that shouldn't be a problem, and we should have it represented as an integer. If it's represented as a string in the YAML file, we should probably convert it and have it all as integers in the Elixir side. Does that make sense? Also,
Um,
yeah, go
the
ahead,
thing is,
Thomas.
you can just like pass the arbitrary sized integer to the Rust side, or even with raw C, because the NIF API doesn't allow you to transform it, as far as I know. Um, so we need to pass it as something else, like a binary, I suggested. Um, I think we'll need to have like or an intermediate type where we represent it as an integer in Elixir, or have a helper function or something to transform it to an integer and just access it like it's a getter or something like that.
Um, I think that those are very good questions. I wouldn't implement something like a big int in integer in Elixir, because Elixir already handles every integer as an arbitrary sized integer. So I wouldn't create our own type doing what Elixir already does. I would just like add a conversion from like Elixir integers to Rust integers for the ones that are too big. Like for instance, if we need to pass a U265 integer from Elixir to Rust and we cannot do that, then we should just establish an intermediary type for that specific operation, but not for having it like present in Elixir. And then when we get results back, we should just transform it back to a regular Elixir integer. Because if we have like a wrapper around a regular integer in Elixir, we will just start overloading a lot of functions just to work with regular integers, and I would try to avoid that. Does that make sense? If not, like please let me know. Maybe I also repeated some of what you were already saying.
We can discuss it later, but
Yeah,
it gives some problem with the way the NIF is already made. Like you need the type to have another, like not a U256 as an integer. You need to have it like something else
of
for
course.
Rustler to be able to parse it. What I was suggesting was using like another container type, like for example execution block header, one in SSE types and one we use internally that represents it like an integer.
I I'm
Um,
sorry, I don't quite understand that solution. But I think that this definitely merits like a longer discussion. Let's do the following. Like let's schedule a meeting after the daily, and like Paul, Thomas, and I, and if of course if Martin wants or anyone else wants, they can join as well. But we should have a longer technical discussion after the daily. Does that sound alright for you guys?
yeah, for
Sure.
sure. Just to close this parenthesis,
Yeah,
I think that the problem doesn't come mostly from the conversion from Rust U256 to any type in Elixir. I think the problem mostly arises from our reading of the YAML file, because there's multiple, at least that could be problems that I'm seeing when I'm reading what our deserialized objects should be. For example, the deserialized objects that, like, it should be a string, like it should be a U256 in the specs, but it's actually a string, and it's telling us that our our type should be a string also, which is problematic. And you have other things like that. For example, an empty string that is written in the specs here is represented as a 0.
I think that,
So obviously it will fail. So
yeah,
we have
I
code
think that
like
I get it. I think that we have two separate problems, and I really see what you're saying, Paul, and that's definitely a problem. Like I do recognize the problem that you're talking about, but I think that we have I think that we have two separate problems. One is related to conversions, and the other one is related to to parsing, and the other one is related to Rustler. And I think that Tomas's solution or suggested solution is representing big integers as a string, and that's causing you problems, or you're like seeing problems when you deserialize. I think that Tomas's solution is causing you problems basically. So I think that we should, like the three of us at least, and if anyone else wants to join, that's great. Should discuss for a solution that works for everybody. So I would just like try to see if that's the case, or if we have more problems that I'm not seeing yet. I'll schedule a meeting after the daily so that we can continue that discussion. Is that okay for you guys? Awesome. Thanks for understanding. Sorry to interrupt you. I just don't wanna, like, because like I get the idea that we will be at least like 30, 40 minutes talking about this, and I don't want the daily to extend that much. All right. I did take notes on that in the daily notes. So Paul, do you have anything else? Like that's already plenty, but I wanted to know if you have more stuff, or if that's it.
No, I think that that's it. And after, I'm just starting to look around the roadmap to see what will be the next steps. And as I said, I think in the last dailies, I think it will be potentially the Beacon API implemented in Phoenix. So I started reading a little bit about the documentation of Phoenix and how to implement APIs with Phoenix, and look into the block processing side on the engine API side to be able to validate the block once we receive it.
That's cool.
So
Yeah,
maybe that.
I am fully aligned with that idea, and that's great that you're studying some Elixir, some Phoenix. Phoenix is a great framework. Awesome. Okay, Thomas, you want to go next?
Yeah. Yesterday I continued work on like designing the network component. I sent a draft PR with a working example. I had some problems. I think one of the like each call to receive a gossip message from a peer is blocking, and I think that's causing issues with the VM. I'm running those as uh, dirty scheduler threads, so that shouldn't be a problem. But there was some kind of thing like that. Anyways, I think I managed to fix it. Once I finish it, I'll mark the PR as ready for review. The last one is already there if any of you want to check it. And today I'm gonna continue trying to fix that. Um, yeah, mostly that. I don't know if I'll finish it for today.
Sure, that's perfect. Yeah, I'll give a review for the one that's already ready for review. Aside from that, yeah, that's perfect. As for me, I think I'm the only one left. I continued my research on storage solutions. I studied a little bit about LevelDB, which is a key value store made by Google. Which I think it's the one that Prism uses. I've mostly seen databases, or if it doesn't use LevelDB, it uses PolDB. I think that they had like a period of using LevelDB, which is the one that is used by Geth, and then they transition to PolDB. That they did some benchmarking, and they saw that for read heavy operations, that one was the one to go. I'm trying to do a little bit more analysis to see if we actually need a key value store like that from arbitrary binaries to arbitrary binaries, or if we can leverage a more powerful database like an SQL one, and we can save like the key value store for specific types like payload executions or blobs or stuff like that. So I'm trying to see where the optimal lies in there. That's what I'm trying to do there right now. And my immediate output would be uh, what we need to save. Like for now, we only want to save blocks, so that's going to be very easy, and we don't need storage for the first milestone anyway. But the reason why I want to already have the storage solution or idea is to not have to rework a lot of the design later on because we change our storage solution. Because sometimes storage shapes the way that you access data. So yeah, I'm basically working on that, and I'll try to have at least a document between today and tomorrow explaining what we need to save. And for the first milestone, I think that we can just have like an in-memory gen server storing the blocks in order for us to just use it and show it, or even an agent, which is an abstraction on top of the gen server. But that's just a workaround solution for the storage, not to block the rest of the stuff. It's definitely not a production-ready solution. Like it's not something that we should. Um, it's not something that we want for the long term. So yeah, that's it. Any comments or questions? All right. As always,
I'm curious to see your
Yeah.
document, but
Okay.
because as far as I know, like most blockchains have kind of like a key value store, because I don't think you do complex like joins or relationships of data. So I'm curious to see what the use case could be for a SQL like database.
Yeah. Like have in mind, like in my opinion, 80 to 90% of the chance is I'm probably going to default to a key value store like everyone else. Like if every other consensus client is doing that, it's probably the way to go. But I'm trying to analyze if that's not like a preferred solution because there's a cultural thing, or if it's like really the way to go because hey, we have like very hierarchical things that we can't or are not efficient to be represented in SQL or something like that. So yeah, I'm just
Okay,
trying to
cool.
get my head around that and not like falling like if we're doing a new consensus client, I'm trying not to fall around the same stuff that others already did, just because it's what they did. If there's still a high chance that I'll end up like we'll end up doing the same thing if it related to storage because like they all seem to have come into the same solution. So, but yeah,
Yeah, definitely makes sense to look at it from first principles.
yeah. Anything else? All right, for the second 5 second silence, I would say that we are ready. Thank you all for joining and see you all tomorrow.